what I basically want to talk about quickly here is last season's player stats, and it'll kind of lead into our other poll. And we saw 2 years ago the Sabres had a lot of players that had career years. You had the Dylan Cousins, the Tage Thompsons, Rasmus Dahlin. They all had career years. Last year, they took a little bit of a step back, and we saw that their leading scorer, I got it up on the video version, you guys following along, Alex Tuch led their team with 59 points, along with Rasmus Dahlin on the back end with 59 points. Tage obviously had an injury-plagued season, still finished with 56 points and 29 goals. Other than J.J. Peterka really taking a step forward with his 28 goals and breaking out, everyone else pretty much regressed in the point totals. So with Lindy Ruff's new system and Seth Appert there, like if we parlay that into the poll here, in which Sabres player will have the biggest bounce back spike in points, Thompson, Cousins, Alex Tuch, Rasmus Dahlin. Cousins won this poll at 83%. Dahlin was second at 16.7. Where do you kind of sit on those core players that really need to have a bounce back season?
Yeah, I think they all obviously need to have a bounce back, but it's not really much of a surprise that Cousins was the runaway, like the winner of that poll, because when you really look at it, like 31 goals, 37 assists 2 years ago, dropping down to 18 goals and only 47 points is a pretty big regression for him. There were moments in the season where you saw Cousins kind of flash what we saw a couple of years ago, and I think he's much closer to that player. Is he a consistent 30 goal scorer? I'm not sure, but I think he can be consistently in the 25 goal range, right? Thompson, like you said, he had a down year, injury plague. He still scored 29 goals. So, yeah, like disappointing for him. But if Thompson and Tuck are in that 60, 65 point range, you're not thrilled, but you're like, all right, okay, at least they're kind of producing at a consistent level. So I think, it makes sense that Cousins wins there. I think you would like to see Paterka kind of repeat at least what he did last year, maybe take another step forward. Jack Quinn, you would like to see maybe he gets to that 25, 30 goal range this year. So it's what team are they? Are they closer to that breakout team that scored a ton of goals, or are they closer to the team that we saw last year that is just average offensively? And maybe it's the rose colored glasses, but I think they're a lot closer to what we saw 2 years ago. Now, are they all going to have career years? No, that's just unrealistic to expect. But I think you can expect them to be much better than they were last year, because I don't think last year is a true representation of what each one of those players can be.
So you would say somewhere in between the 75-80 range would be Tuck's usual, or Thompson's usual ceiling there. That 92-point season was a little bit of an outlier there. He broke out there. Like what are you kind of thinking?
I think 94 being his career
94,
high.
sorry.
Yeah, right. When he went from 14 and 38 to 68 points to 94 points down to 56 points, right? So like it's somewhere in the middle. I think he's a consistent 35, 40 goal scorer. I think he can be in the 65 to 75 point range. If he's over a point per game, that's fantastic, but you're not expecting, like, we have to see it from him. Last year you kind of saw these, again, same thing with Thompson and Tuck. You saw injuries, you saw the flashes there. Tuck didn't look right for a large portion of the beginning of the season. So it's very, very, I think it's much closer to that 75 point ceiling than it is the 95, 100 point guy, but still 75 points from your number one center is pretty solid.
And when you look at the team stats, Austin, before we move on here, like the Sabres had, when you look at it, the fourth worst power play in the NHL. Like, obviously a new bench boss, no more of the Don Granato system, and we've already seen the funny things on X about Twitter Sabres Twitter fans rejoicing over Lindy Ruff and Seth Appert saying that we're going to try to score dirty goals on the power play and not just be the same, one-dimensional team that tries to hit Tage for that one-timer play. Like, obviously the power play has to be better. I don't think anybody would say it doesn't. But what else do you think needs to improve in the team stats category for you to say that this team's going to make enough of a leap forward to be in that contention for a playoff spot?
I think power play, right? Like that's the main thing you just said there. I think if the power play improves, you'll see those offensive numbers that we just talked about improve. But at the same time, I think what you would like to see is just more ways of generating offense instead of just relying solely off the rush. No more one and dones. Don't want to be a dump and chase team, but if you have to dump and chase every once in a while to start that cycle and get that cycle going, that would be big. get those second chance goals. I think the biggest problem with the Sabres last year was they were a one and done opportunity team. So whether that's dump and chase, whether that's, greasy goals that Lenny Ruff talked about, you got to start generating more than one opportunity each time you get in the offensive zone.
Yeah, and they obviously made some changes. The Jeff Skinners and those types of guys are gone. They brought in a brand new bottom six, which we'll get into. But power play is basically the main outlier there, and that should I guess equate to more points in the standings if they are able to get that power play upwards of 20 to 25%.
Yeah, I mean 25% would be fantastic, right?
That'd be like top 5 in the league.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what Seth Appert's system is here. It looked good again a couple times we saw it in the preseason, but also last year we said it looked good in the preseason. They were using Zach Benson as a bumper guy in the preseason, and we saw none of that during the regular season. So want to see what it looks like in the regular season. Did like that quote though, no more force feeding Tage for one timers. That'll still happen, but that's not going to be their whole identity. I do love that quote.